when we're talking objective versus subjective, and Ava, I'm sorry, I see you have other conversations going. Do you mind, actually, I love having your cameras on, but if you're having other conversations, it's distracting me a little bit. I think you have questions. Thank you. Okay, so if we're discussing truth or falsity, right, the question is whether or not the truth or falsity of a certain statement or judgment depends upon the person making it or something out there in the world, right? And so when we say things like something is a fact, we typically mean that the truth or falsity doesn't just depend on what we think, right? That it depends on something in the world. So like Evan was saying, if two people disagree, somebody's going to be right and somebody's going to be wrong, right? Whereas that's not going to be the case with subjective judgments, right? Why is nobody right or wrong if you disagree about subjective judgments? I often think that it implies a bias, right? So subjective might mean that it just reflects our own personal values, right? But could our values line up with reality? Sometimes, not always, right? Yeah, so biases, right, like they can be or not be accurate, right, in some ways, depending on how we're looking at things. So subjective, right, the reason that people can't really be right or wrong when you disagree about something that's subjective is because the truth or falsity of that thing doesn't depend on anything in the world, right? So if Evan and I disagree on what the greatest flavor of ice cream is, right, the reason that neither one of us is right or wrong in our position is because there is no objective truth out into the world as to what the correct answer is, right? That the truth or falsity of that position is always going to depend on who answers the question, right? Whereas if I say something, a proposition like the earth is flat, right? Or the earth is shaped like a disc, right? We want to say that the truth or falsity of that statement is objective, right? That regardless of what we might think, even if we disagree, there is a truth of the matter, right, out there in the world. And someone's going to be right and someone's going to be wrong. So now the question is, what do we think judgments about beauty and art are? Do we think they are objective in their truth values, or do we think they're entirely subjective? Right? In terms of what makes something beautiful, is it completely dependent upon the person making the judgment? Right? So we have like those phrases, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? That would mean that it's subjective. Or, right, do we say no? If I show you some, piece of poop on the sidewalk, I can't just say that it's beautiful. Like maybe there's going to be something objectively not beautiful about it. We might need to debate. What do we think? All right, so Lunari, I see you think it's subjective. So why do you think that aesthetic judgments about beauty or art, aesthetic judgments, why do you think that they're subjective? Yeah, good, good. Right, so in terms of the things that we actually use to estimate value, right, money is often used to estimate value. We can we can objectively look at the world and say that there is definitely a subjective element to what we value certain things, right? So some people are willing to pay a lot of money for something, right? Whereas someone else might not be able to pay a lot of money. But are they paying that much money because it's objectively worth that much, or just because they really like the banana on the wall? How do we explain the 75%? What are they catching? Are they all capturing some objective feature of the thing? that maybe the other 25% aren't. And so then we have to ask, right, especially when we get to the end of this section, when we get to the end of any philosophical section, especially when we get to the feminist critiques, right? So if we're looking at what has been considered traditionally beautiful, right, some people would argue that, well, yeah, it's been considered traditionally beautiful because it is just objectively so, right? And that 25% is just maybe not seeing it. But a feminist might argue that 75% agree that that is beautiful because tradition has told them that that is what beauty is. And it's maybe only the 25% who are willing to see things as beautiful outside of what they've been told. Right? So where is that consistency, right? Is it coming from, is maybe some subjective view of like the very elite people who have control over the media and who disseminate images of beauty, right? What has been the traditional ideal of human beauty throughout most of history? Exactly. Yes. So social norms that create a bias would be so this is the interesting thing about feminists, right? Is that what they're doing is they're reclassifying what we mean by objective. This is actually a little bit of feminist epistemology, but I think it's relevant here, right? So this, instead of taking this traditional view of objectivity, right, which is saying it's completely independent of people, right? We know that feminists are not going to accept that, right? They don't think that people exist in vacuums. So they're not going to think that notions of beauty exist independently of people either.